Sean, are you there? Well, I think Sean's trying to buzz in, but I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. This is week 4. Our topic tonight is violence and discipline in schools. This is Mels 603, so we do law and finance. We'll move into some finance next week, but this week we're still working on law. So let's look. Let me go to share screen, and let's look at our syllabus, our weekly schedule. Share screen. And here we go. So here are the things that we're to look at this week: assessing a school safety plan, students' rights, review local student handbook, assess discipline plan, student discipline, search and seizure, due process and action, technology, cyberbullying, and acceptable use policies. Those are the things that you should have read about this week. The things that I want to cover with you tonight. Let me go back to my share screen here. I want to start out with this violence in schools. Basically, it says violence came because of consolidation to save money. We also consolidated in the 60s to force integration, put students and other folks together that hadn't been together before, including communities and parents, and brings about alienation. We won't get too deep into that. Poverty, disorganization, overcrowding led to more violence in schools. Narrow aggression of violence. What we need to understand is in the state of North Carolina, we have strictly defined violence and acts of crime and violence, and they are different. Acts of crime are different from acts of violence. So let's look at that. This document is on our course content page at the bottom. I hope that you can see it. If not, you can pull it up from our course content page, North Carolina Disciplinary Data Reporting Procedures. And it starts from the very beginning. The thing to remember is that we report to the state. We report incidents, not outcomes. Now, what that means is if a kid gets in a fight, we report that he was in the fight. Reporting outcomes is in error because some folks think, well, if I didn't suspend him, I don't have to tell anybody. I don't have to report that. No, we report even if no action was taken or if all we did was consequence the kid, all we did was just talk to him. We report what happened, not as a result of what happened. And that's clearly defined right here, is organized around incidents. And here are the things. No Child Left Behind says that children don't have to go to low-performing schools, nor do they have to go to schools that are persistently dangerous. These are the things that count against your persistently dangerous calculation: homicide, assault resulting in serious bodily injury, assault involving use of a weapon, rape, sexual offense, sexual assault, kidnapping, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and taking indecent liberties with a minor. Now, you say, well, how many of those do you get, Dale? Well, you get one for every 200 kids or five for every 1,000 kids. And it's not an IQ test. If you've got less than 1,000 kids, you say, well, if I don't have 1,000 kids, then it doesn't affect me. No, it affects you no matter how many you have. You get one for every 200, which is 5% of these incidents. Now, you say, well, Dale, I don't know if I know what those things are. So I don't know if I'm going to report. Well, the state, in very, very graphic detail, at the back of this manual, has defined each of those acts of violence. And here they are. I mean, they've gone, it's as close as you can get. Assault resulting in serious injury, an intentional offer or attempt by force or violence to do injured person other that causes reasonable apprehension of immediate bodily harm resulting in one of the following: substantial risk of death, serious permanent disfigurement, coma, permanent or protracted condition that causes extreme pain, permanent or protracted loss of impairment of function of any bodily member or organ that results in prolonged hospitalization. So as you can see, and even under the sexual ones, it's very graphic, that these things, all acts of crime and violence, are very, very closely defined in this manual. Now, these are the 16 acts of crime and violence, remembering that only 9 of them are actually count against you. Assault with injury counts against you in your violence calculation. Assault with a weapon does. Assault on school officials, if it's not with serious injury, does not. It's an act of crime, but not violence. Bomb threats does not count against you. Burning of a building does not. Homicide does count against you as an act of violence, as does kidnapping. Alcohol and drugs do not count against you. Possession of a firearm or a weapon do not count against you in that calculation. They are crimes. Not if they weren't used in a violent act, they don't count against you. Rape does. Robbery with a dangerous weapon does. Sexual assault does. Sexual offense does. And indecent liberties with a minor. And all those are highly defined. And being a Baptist, I'm not going to read those to you. You're adults. You can read them yourself. But again, here are the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 that count against you. There's 6 that don't. The 10 that count against you in your calculation for persistently dangerous or assault resulting in serious bodily injury, assault involving use of a weapon, rape, sexual offense. So all those things count against those calculations. And of course, you have to call the police if you have these things to happen. And it tells you who's responsible for all this stuff. The principal is ultimately responsible, but you have an assistant principal that's responsible to get all the data elements into Power School. And so all the things that have to be put in, and you don't, and it says that, you have a discipline data coordinator. This is usually an assistant principal, and you have one for the LEA. I used to be that person, usually an assistant superintendent, who's responsible for making sure that these things get reported to the state and to law enforcement. Now, we report everything that happens to the state, not just acts of crime and violence, but only the acts of violence count against our persistently dangerous. So if you want to know what has to be reported, if we come on down here and we look, here are all the classifications of incidents in the state of North Carolina. There's a lot of good stuff in this. You should read it. All right, here we go. You have 3 categories of incidents. You have PDs, which count against that calculation for persistently dangerous. That's one of those 10 violent incidents. You have ROs that are crimes that don't count against your calculation, but must be reported to law enforcement. Again, drugs, alcohol, those things. And then you have UBs, which are unacceptable behavior. But all this stuff that you can see on this list here, leaving class without permission, cell phone use, all this has to be reported to the state. Now, there it all is. Incredible amount of stuff. Consequence type. Now, going back again, we report incidents, not outcome. Here are the consequence or the outcome type. Supervised activities, ISS, OSS, expulsion, corporal punishment, after school detention, even if you just conference a kid. If there's a written referral on a kid, it better go in and the state better know about it. Because they use this for reporting for the Office of Civil Rights. You'll lose your federal money if you don't report all these things. Now, I have people ask me from time to time about Swiss. Swiss is a data collection system that works parallel to this one. It does not take the place of this one. You cannot download Swiss into PowerSchool. You're basically doing double duty. Anything you can put in Swiss, you can put in PowerSchool if you learn how. So the problem with Swiss, it conditions people to think that there are major and minor infractions. There are not. The state does not recognize major and minor. You report all infractions to the state. So this manual has examples. It speaks to alternative placements. It speaks to suspensions out of school, in school. It speaks to alternative schools. It speaks to all of those kinds of things. It tells you how everything about that you want to know about discipline reporting and how to and examples of and definitions of. It's got your cyberbullying in here. I asked you in one of your discussion posts. It's got cyberbullying in here. It defines it, and right here it is. I mean, all these things. Here's your cyberbullying right here. Let's see if it'll tell me what page that is. No. Page 16, cyberbullying. But all the things that you need to know are in this manual. You need to spend a couple hours with it, especially when you get your job if you're an AP, because you'll be the person responsible for this. And so I'll go ahead and click out of that and go back to stop share, and then I'll go back to share screen again. And back to violence in schools. And again, all of your definitions, all of your theoretical things are in this one. And it talks about violent acts, and there they are. All of your theoretical stuff is in this document. It gives you all your statistics and the background as to why we need to be involved. But one of the things that this also talks about no child left behind, violence, all the things I've just covered for you. So this is a good one. This is on week 4, violence in schools. You need to look at this PowerPoint. It's a really good one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight. The part that I want to kind of focus on from this tonight is antecedent behaviors. Let me go back to share screen again, and let's talk about antecedent behaviors. Antecedent behaviors are the little things that happen before the big things. Folks say, well, it's just the luck of the draw, the roll of the dice, the rub of the green that, that a kid had a gun. No, it's not. Let me say that again. No, it's not. It's not just, we had bad luck. Nope, I'm afraid that's not the case. If we see a lot of bandanas and colors and gang paraphernalia and tattoos, it won't be long before we have weapons. If we see a lot of inappropriate display of affection, a lot of improper touching and those kinds of things, we'll have sexual infractions before long. We know those things. If we see a lot of conflicts, we'll have fights before long. This is a presentation that I did last year that I worked for CMS, and I was asked to do the keynote presentation at the Helpful Living Conference, the big one the DPI puts on at Four Seasons in Greensboro. And it was about identification and prevention of violence. We were coming up on this 2011. We were coming up on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and violence was still on people's minds. We just had a couple of shootings and some other things that had happened, and the state wanted to do something. And so I put this together. And If you have gang activity, you're going to have drugs, you're going to have weapons, you'll have violence. Sexting leads to, and sexting and sexual harassment lead to sexual offenses. Bullying and cyberbullying lead to serious issues also. If you allow cell phones and kids to use them in buildings, you will have sexting and you will have cyberbullying. It's just that simple. So the little stuff will stop the big stuff. And these are some of the things. Everybody, No Child Left Behind says you can't have persistently dangerous schools. We've already talked about that. That's where that comes from. They've developed guidelines. You can't have more than 0.5% or one for every 200. 5 or more for 1,000, that's one for every 200. You'll be defined as persistently dangerous. And again, they're the ones that do that. You get put on a watch list for the first year. Causes and responses to violence, psychological, socioeconomic. Sean, are you finally there? Are you finally there, Sean?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I saw you tried to get in earlier. Is the technical problem on my end or yours?
It's on mine. My internet's being screwy tonight.
Yeah, I think there's some storms. I think if you're not on a hard line tonight, I don't know that you can get in. I think we're having problems all over. I've been covering.
Gotcha.
I've been covering this antecedent behaviors, and I went over the state reporting manual. Of course, you can go back and view it online. The big thing is the state reporting manual. It's at the bottom of the page on our course content page, and it has all the stuff about violence, about No Child Left Behind says you can't have persistently dangerous. It has the acts that count against you, the acts of violence, death, homicide, kidnapping, rape, those kinds of things. But the point of my discussion tonight is that the big stuff doesn't have to happen. It's the little stuff that leads to the big stuff. We call that antecedent behaviors. There's a good one in there that talks about violence, and it's a Violence in Schools PowerPoint. I've already covered it. It's on our week 4. Go to the course materials for week 4, and it gives the background of why we have violence in schools. My point tonight is there are things that we can do to stop the little stuff that will help stop the big stuff. You can't just throw up your hands and say it's the rub of the green, it's going to happen, just my bad luck. It's not just your bad luck. There are steps that you can take. If you understand, if you've got poor kids, if you've got overcrowding, all these psychological, socioeconomic, cultural, and political factors, you're going to have them. Everybody has those factors. And so violence in schools is everybody's problem. But there's some, risk factors, again, overcrowding, poor design, lack of disciplinary procedures, lack of follow through, teacher and peer rejection of at risk, school consolidation that puts schools and communities together that don't normally go together. Big one is lack of proper supervision. There are things that lead to violence in schools. Things that you can do to stop some of the violence in schools, stop the little stuff. For example, if you have a lot of inappropriate touching and excessive display of or inappropriate display of affection, won't be long you'll have sexual offenses. It escalates. If you have bandanas, gang signs, gang tattoos, those kinds of things, it won't be long till you have weapons, drugs, and violence. If you don't stop the little stuff, it becomes the big stuff. And everybody has the little stuff, and that's what the Violence in Schools PowerPoint and what this one about is everybody has these factors. Nobody is immune. I mean, if you go back to the defining moment for our school culture now, which was Columbine in Jonesboro and some of those kids had been cyberbullied. Those kids had been bullied. Even though it wasn't about low socioeconomic, those things were happening. They were alienated from society and from the school. They were outcasts. They weren't poor. They weren't overcrowded, but there were some other things there that caused them, student alienation. I mean, that's and student resentment towards school routines. That happens in schools that were not poor. So the point is violence is everybody's problem, and there are things that you can do to stop it. And there are some of those things. Possible anti-violence measure, a district code of conduct that is enforced and it is legal and enforceable. The legal terms here are arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary is we enforce the rules on some kids and not on others. Can't do that. And capricious, we give more punishment than the code of conduct allows. We can't do that. But firm and fair enforcement of the district code of conduct, that will help. Intervention teams. One of the things that you will have to do when you do the OMA Part C is you'll have to look at special populations and what services they get. And one of those special population is your intervention team students. And those kids are referred not just for academic difficulty, but also for behavioral difficulty. We forget that part. And that's a school-based committee. That means the school's in charge of that. Intervention specialists, behavior management personnel, BMTs, security personnel, alternative learning programs, alternative schools, and transitional case managers. Now, a lot of this stuff is covered in that state manual that I talked about, that disciplinary data reporting manual that has a lot of this stuff. But these are the kinds of things that you can do to try to lessen some of the violence that goes on, especially in larger urban districts. Positive factors of school that can help reduce violence, positive school climate and atmosphere. That's where the teacher working condition survey comes in. Working on that atmosphere, that culture, clear and high expectations for students, strong student bonding, high levels of student participation and parent involvement, opportunities to gain skills and develop socially, and visible and accessible staff members. Anti-violence measures, we just covered those. Gangs are a big part of all urban education now. I'm going to do a little, I don't know, somebody asked me one time why I did the gang thing, and I said, look, everybody has gangs. Even the most rural places have gangs. You're either aware of it or you're just not aware of it.
Hold on, baby.
Not a problem. Erica, are you there? Erica?
Oh, you're so sweet. I love you. Thank you.
All right. Erica, if you're there, welcome. Overview, I hired a criminologist in CMS to find all this stuff out for us and see what we could do. And here's the information that he provided. An overview of gang prevention is the types of gangs, names of locally identified gangs, you need to know that, the levels of involvement, graffiti, clothing, signs, and symbols, and how to recognize and interpret. Are you now with us, Erica?
I am with you. Sorry, I'm
No, you're fine. We're moving on to gangs now.
awesome.
Types of gangs are traditional, non-traditional, hybrid, tagger, and the criminal enterprise. Criminal enterprise is what we used to call motorcycle gangs. So those are the types of gangs that you would have in your area. Traditional gangs are Bloods and Crips, Latin Kings, people like that. Locally in Charlotte, the Bloods, these were all, and the Crips, and Insane Clown Posse. These were all national gang affiliated gangs that we identified in Charlotte. Locally identified, you had your national gangs, MS-13, SIR-13, BPS, Kings, Bloods, and then, of course, you had your Crips, that the Asian section of Crips. You had those in Charlotte. You have levels involved. You have fantasy, fascination, the folks that are just on the fringe. Like the kid wearing the Batman cape there. Then you have your at-risk, the ones that are participating with the gangs in some violence or illegal activity. That's the kid touching his hand on the stove there. They're at risk. Then you have your associates, which are the ones that are basically interning to be gang members and have to do initiations. I think that's a picture of the Hitler Youth there. And then you have a full-blown gang member, and then you have your hardcore gang member, which is
Sorry.
no, you're fine. So these are from CMS facilities in Charlotte. These are tags that we found, and that's how we identified a lot of these gangs. These are actual gang paraphernalia taken off of students. This is MS-13 top right on your screen there. You've got 1, then 3. You got 1 blue, a white, and then 3 blue. That's 1, 3, and blue. That's MS-13, and here are gang tattoos. This is Insane Clown Posse here. Of course, you can see the Crips and the Bloods. So if you have gangs, and you do, you will have violence. The idea is, not sure you can stop kids from, you can try to stop kids from getting involved in gangs, to try to get them involved in school. But the bigger thing is to be able to identify and know who they are and take action against them. It's against the law to be in a gang. Let me say that again. North Carolina has passed a statute. It's against the law to be in a gang. So you can take action. Gang activity is one of those reportable offenses that was back in the manual. For those of you who joined us late, under course content on Blackboard at the very end is the disciplinary data reporting manual. Gang activity just in itself, kid wearing a bandana, a hat, a tattoo, you can take action against a kid because being in a gang is illegal. Now, as I said earlier, one of our biggest problems in school is the little stuff, the kissing, the hand holding, the inappropriate display of affection that later on becomes the rape, the sexual offense, sexual assault, those things. It's antecedent behaviors, the little stuff that becomes the big stuff. This notion that big things are going to happen, it's just random. It's not random. I can go in a school and do an audit in just a few minutes, and I can tell you what your next likely major instance is going to be. I hate that I can do that, but I can. And we know what leads to, we see gang stuff, you're going to have drugs and weapons. We see, a lot of inappropriate behavior, then you're going to have sexual stuff that happens. So prevention, sexual harassment of students is illegal. Title IX, we talked about that earlier. Title IX is one of those laws that, gender equity, and it protects students from harassment in the school setting. It protects both male and female students. Nobody shall be discriminated against or harassed because of their sexual identity or orientation or any of those things. State statute said that schools have the power to discipline students if they behave inappropriately with sexual harassment behavior. School districts can be held responsible. That was the watershed case in North Carolina in the early 90s. Sometime in the late 80s in Union County, which is just east of Charlotte. The next county over, the county seat being Monroe, somewhere in that county, a student claimed that he had been sexually harassed because of his sexual orientation, and people at school knew it and didn't do anything about it. For the first time ever, schools were held liable financially, as were individual administrators. And so Richard Schwartz and Associates, a law firm out of Raleigh, was retained in the early 90s by the state of North Carolina, and they had teams that traveled all over the state to train sitting principals. I think it was 91. I was one of those. That if this stuff happens, you're going to be liable. You've got to stop it. If somebody reports it, you've got to report it to law enforcement and have it investigated. You can't sweep it under the rug. You can't do local investigations. You're not qualified to do sexual investigations. And so that's one of the biggest things that I tell students is if somebody comes and says that a sexual infraction has occurred on campus, and again, we go back to that's rape, sexual assault, sexual offense, indecent liberties. If you get a report of one of those, I'm not talking about inappropriate touching here. Go back and read those definitions in that state reporting manual. Again, it's at the bottom under course content, all the way at the bottom in Blackboard. There it is. It's a link. It's online only. You can't download it and print it anymore. You used to could. I've got some old ones that you could. But you go in and look at those. You look at those definitions. If somebody comes in and says one of those things happened in your building, first thing you do, call 911 or call your resource officer. You do not attempt an investigation of a sexual crime. You can investigate inappropriate touching or, a little boy kiss a little girl or something like that. That's not what we're talking about. Let's be clear here. But if you get a report of a sexual crime, then you are not qualified to do that investigation. So you better call the police. You better get your resource officer. You better get it to law enforcement immediately. Law enforcement has no trouble whatsoever throwing you under the bus if you attempt to do some kind of half-baked investigation that contaminates their case. A high school in the northern part of Mecklenburg County. We had an interim principal there that came out of the central office, a long time, very, very successful high school principal in Mecklenburg County that had gone to the central office, and we needed an interim principal there just for a short period of time, and he graciously went out to do it. The student came to an assistant principal and reported that she'd been raped. She said it was rape. Rather than getting the resource officer involved, not the town of Charlotte, it was in the northern part of the county, and it was in the town of Huntersville. And so they had a resource officer on campus, but instead of getting him involved, for some reason they said, well, they did a little investigation. They said, well, she's 16 and she consented, and now she's having we're not going to. So of course her parents went to the news media, went to the police, and they filed their own charges. And the police the police chief of Huntersville got on TV and said, we feel certain that a crime occurred, but since the evidence was tainted by the school doing an unauthorized investigation, there's nothing we can do. And of course, folks had to go home that worked for us. They no longer work for us, unfortunately. Again, this is one of those things. There's no intervening step. Either you're working for us or you're not. We have to let you go if you do something like that. Now, their contention was that she was 16 years old and she had consented. What is the age of consent in North Carolina? It is 16. But there's a caveat to consent. Let me see if I can pull that up right quick. I'm going to have to stop the share. And I'm going to have to, let's see, let me go back to share screen. And I'm going to go here. I think it's timed out on me. There it is. If you can't see me, let me know, Sean. All right, I'm going to open this. There's a caveat. They hadn't read the manual. Yes, if you're 16, you can consent, but You see the discipline data reporting procedures?
Yep.
Oh, great. All right. Read this one right here. Here's the caveat that got them, that cost them all their job. A person is guilty of rape if that person engages in vaginal intercourse with another person by force against the will if the person being assaulted is mentally disabled or mentally incapacitated. She was self-contained EC. Is somebody that's self-contained EC, do they have the mental capacity to consent at any age? That would be no. They forgot that part. They said she's 16. She's old enough to consent, but she was in a self-contained unit. The mother freely admitted that she probably wanted to, but she doesn't have the capacity. The school is supposed to protect her from that because she is mentally disabled and incapacitated. Self-contained kids qualify on both counts. It gets a little bit tricky with EC kids that aren't self-contained. It's a no-brainer with self-contained EC kids. And so, again, you better read these things carefully. If these crimes, but this is the manual that I was talking about. This thing is wonderful. It has everything you need to know about what to report, how to report it, no child left behind, persistently dangerous, alternative schools, everything that has to be reported, all the different categories, everything is in this one. And the problem that they had at that school, is that they didn't realize that she couldn't consent. And so they tried to do an investigation, but they shouldn't have done an investigation. When the word rape came up, that's one of those 10. You don't do those. You don't just say, well, she probably, she's bad about doing that, and, she consented and all that. No. And so principal and an AP had to go home over that. So you're being held responsible for these things. Harassment, you're held responsible for that. If you know it, somebody tells you didn't do anything about it, whether it's cyberbullying, just face-to-face bullying, or whether it's harassment or sexual harassment. You better know what to do. And that manual tells you what to do. That's the good thing about it, that I like about it.
I was able to download a copy of that manual.
Great. I think
I can email if you like.
No, I've got one. I can do it when I'm not in Zoom. It just won't let me do it while we're in Zoom. Once you get out of Zoom, you can do it, but we can't. I can't do. It won't let me download one into Blackboard either. It does a link. You can download one to a disk, and so I've got one on disk. So that's. But I've just got links in Blackboard. So that's great. I'm glad you got you one. Read that thing from front to back. That's your Bible. You need
Absolutely.
You need to be reading that thing every day. That and your district's code of conduct. If you'll read those and you know those cold, you'll never have a problem because you'll know immediately the right thing to do. And if you understand antecedent behaviors, you're paying attention and you're watching and you see this little stuff, you say, uh-oh, I know what's coming next. We need to nip this, Barney Fife need to nip this in the bud. We need to get the little stuff stopped before the big stuff starts. And so administrations respond deliberate indifference to actual knowledge. So not doing anything at all, these people say, well, Dale, those people went out and made a mistake and that they were being proactive. Yeah, but they weren't supposed to be. It wasn't their job to be. The reason they were being proactive, we finally determined, was to cover it up. They weren't being proactive because they wanted to resolve it. They wanted to figure out how can we get a lid on it. Deliberate indifference. You can't just say, well, I didn't do anything. Well, that's not the appropriate response either. We'll get you for errors of commission and omission. school violence prevention, bullying, cyberbullying, gestures, written, electronic, verbal communication, physical act. I told you I had a case where a kid took his cell phone out and videoed uh, another kid who was doing a racial rant against a kid, was bullying the kid. A kid pulled out of his phone and videoed it, but then he put it on Facebook as as something funny to watch. Well, that's cyberbullying. So, uh, so you got to, again, there's a good definition of cyberbullying in that disciplinary data manual, but there's some good stuff in this one too. Read through all these things. And here are some of the classes of bullying. It can be on race, color, religion, ancestry, natural origin, gender. And that's a big one now because we have so many people who are transgender. Socioeconomic status, academic status, gender ID, physical appearance, sexual orientation, disabilities. Now, I did send a young man home when I was a high school principal in Charlotte. I did send him home for wearing a dress. I didn't send him home because he was wearing a dress. I sent him home because his dress was shorter than we allowed girls to wear, and he had to abide by the same thing.
That's pretty funny.
Yes, that's absolutely the truth. The girls all were mad, not because he was wearing a dress. They said, we can't wear him that short. Why is he getting to wear his that short? And I said, you're absolutely right. And then I told him, you wear a dress every day. Don't bother me a bit. But it has, it can't, we can't tell, it can't be so that we can tell you're a boy when you're wearing it. And we could. It just basically came to his waist. And you can see his underwear. So, we didn't let girls wear them like that. So,
Yeah, that's a no-go.
yeah. So, and so as I said, this has nothing to do with your right to wear the dress, but you can't wear one any different than anybody else can wear. So, we didn't discriminate against him because of his orientation. It's just his dress was too short. When he started wearing dresses longer, as the same as the girls did, then he was fine. Wasn't a problem at all. No student or employee shall be subject to bullying or harassing by school employees or other students. I had a case of where I had a teacher say that she had been made to feel uncomfortable in the building by a vendor. And what the vendor did, who was single, he invited a single young teacher that I had, he invited her on a date. Another faculty member overheard that and said that makes an uncomfortable environment in the workplace. And I was like, well, he's not going to ask you out. You're old enough to be his mama, number one. And she said yes, but it may, it did cause him, so we had to ask him, don't do that. Y'all can't, don't do that in front of other people. She felt threatened or felt uncomfortable in the workplace. And so that's part of harassment too. See, that's part that we get into sometimes in the school business that we don't realize. Some folks feel harassed or uncomfortable indirectly, and they're not the one that was involved in it. So you have to be really careful and cognizant of those things, that people aren't doing things, sometimes when somebody overhears somebody else being harassed, they feel uncomfortable. So even maybe the person who's being harassed doesn't complain, but somebody else does. You still have to take action. You can't say, well, you weren't the one harassed. Well, but if you heard it and you felt uncomfortable and were made to be uncomfortable by it, then yes, you better take it seriously as an administrator. I know that seems kind of indirect, but sometimes you have more of that, quite seriously, than you have the direct stuff. You can't.
People don't want to tell on people.
Exactly. They feel more comfortable saying, I saw this and I felt bad about it, than somebody did this to me. I'll guarantee you, when you get your job, you'll have more people that come and report harassment of an indirect variety than you will direct variety. Seriously. So that's one of those things, but the law is clear on that one. But you're exactly right. People don't want to tell on people. So many times the people who are being harassed won't say a thing, but the people that hear it causes causes an uncomfortable or an unsafe work environment. So you have to deal with that. Any school employee who has witnessed or has relied that student has been subject to bullying shall report the incident. School volunteer. Policy against bullying, harassing behavior. Before the law now is, after, by 2010, every LEA has to have a policy on bullying, and since 2012, it has to include cyberbullying. That's on what we say, Sean, page 14 of that manual, of our Bible manual on cyberbullying. So yes, everybody's got to have one now, and here are the things that have to be in it. Statement prohibiting bullying or harassing behavior, definition of those bullying and harassing behaviors, and description of the type of behavior expected for student and employees. Has to have the consequences and appropriate remedial action, procedure for reporting, a procedure for investigation, a statement that prevents reprisal against the person reporting or whistleblower, and a statement of how the policy is to be disseminated. And nothing says you can't go beyond the minimum. It has to be published by the district. Shall be incorporated in school employees training. We do it, we have refresher courses everywhere I've ever worked. We have initial training, and then we have refreshers for returning people. Sexual harassment, it's sexual in nature, unwelcome, or limits participation. It can be carried out by employees, students, student to student, employee to student, student to employee, employee to employee. All that has to be taken seriously. Sexual misconduct. Have to be really careful with this in high school. Propositions, pressuring students, touching, graffiti of a sexual nature, displaying sexually explicit drawings or pictures, written materials. All of these things are inappropriate, and that's what these things, gets back to antecedent behaviors. If you see these things, you're supposed to take action against them. And I can tell you right now, if you don't take action against these, it won't be long till you'll have rape, indecent liberties, sexual offense, sexual assault. People ask me, well, what are the antecedent behaviors that you're looking for, Dale, for all the sex to prevent the sexual stuff? Right here it is on this slide right here on slide number 51. This one and the next one defines the stuff that I'm talking about. The antecedent behaviors that lead to the sexual violence. Got definitions about sexting here and an example. Put this together. What is sexting? And it tells you exactly. Got all the law behind it. Is a hug sexual harassment? No, it's context. If somebody doesn't want it, yeah, it is. We've got examples of the good kind, and criminal versus non-criminal. Yes, the conduct must be unwelcome, but you never know. Again, as Erica pointed out, the person it's directed at, may not be the person that complains. So it's off limits. I mean, it's not to happen, whether the person complains or not. It's not to be done. I've got some examples in here. to give you some guidelines. Now, these are all situations that I had to occur in CMS. I've taken out all the names to protect the guilty, but every one of these things really occurred. So here are some of my stories, but they're pared down to where I can do it in a public forum like this. But all these things really happened. These are not hypotheticals. Considerations when you're doing, when you're using your discretion, I've got, relevant considerations, or I've got some of those. When you're making your decisions here, I've got some of that stuff thrown in here for you. I use this as, again, I presented it to the state, but I use this in CMS as a training for all of our new administrators and ongoing staff development for our returning administrators. This is for people like you in the job. I've got some examples here. Got some pictures that go with those. Got, how to recognize and interpret. And I went back, I had the list of, look for these things on slide 50 and 51 and 52, the things to be looking for. And then here's recognize and interpret. So that's it on that one. So for tonight, what's important tonight is make sure that you look at, make sure that you look at the disciplinary data reporting manual, that you look at that antecedent behaviors PowerPoint that I just showed you. It's got all the stuff you need to know in it, the practical application of those stuff. There's one in here on bullying. This is a really good one. You can do that. Your district's got some stuff on bullying, but I've got kind of a general one here. If you want to, recognition and prevention, how to recognize bullying, talks about the law behind it. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I think I put this one together for my classes. It's more of an in general nature, less specific, practical kind of thing. Let's see, stop the share. Go back here to share screen. So that's a pretty good one. If we go back to, I think it timed me out on that one. Let's see if I can get, let's see. Yeah, it's timed me out. I'm gonna have to, let's see. So if you go back to course content, as I said, let's see if it will open up. At the end right here, I've got our reporting procedures. If you go to our course materials, week 4, discipline and law. Of course, I've got the crisis kit, what goes in it. Y'all have already looked at that. This antecedent behaviors is a really good one. I know it's mine, but it's a really good one. And here's the full conference presentation that I did. That violence in schools gives you all the numbers and figures and the rationale behind why you got to be involved in this. Antecedent behaviors is a practical way. It tells you all the stuff you need to know and what to look for and how to do it, what gangs look like, all that stuff. Here's an assessment inventory checklist. What this is, and here's your crisis box. Y'all have already done that. And the ABCs of antecedent behaviors, that's a quick and dirty on the logic behind antecedents. There's another link to disciplinary data. And then, of course, I've got CMS Code of Conduct here. You have one for your district that looks just like it. You need to read it. No need for me to cover it. The only other thing I want to make sure, and here's our incident reporting manual that I had made in CMS so that nobody would have, and a step by step on how to put all that information in. There's one of those in your district somewhere, and there's somebody that takes care of that. The only other thing I wanted to cover tonight quickly, I know my time is running out here. I don't like to keep you much longer than an hour. If it will load for me, it's trying. Yay! All right. North Carolina General Statute 115C 288, all 115C, all 545 are laws for public schools. If you read that, it says that you're supposed to do monthly fire drills, but it also says in that same passage that twice a month you're supposed to do safety inspections. Who knows? Did anybody even know that? That's in the law. Once a month fire drill, twice a month safety inspection. What does a safety inspection look like? It looks like this. Safety inspection is you're supposed to look at your parking lot and make sure cars and kids can't get together in buses and those things. You're supposed to make sure all your chemicals are stored in the kitchen. It speaks to all. The back of the stage has not got junk piled up, so it's a fire hazard and you can't get out. If somebody was on stage, it would be able to get out. Right here, safety posters, eye wash, and OSHA stuff in your labs. It's all right here. You're supposed to do this twice a month. When the state comes out and does an audit, this is what they use. So you need to pull that thing down. Disregard this title right here. That's who puts it out, and that's what it's for. But when you do the twice monthly safety inspection that goes along with the fire drill, this is what you're supposed to do right here. Ladders stored in closet, cords tied up or covered with mats, computer cords zippered together and out of the way, no potential fire hazard or blocked emergency exit. Students not lowered in halls or corridors. Visitor sign in and out of the main office. Visitor log is maintained. Graffiti is read, recorded, and removed at the earliest possible time. Again, that speaks to that harassment stuff. Graffiti is harassment. It's got to be removed as early as possible. Fire evacuation plans are posted in all occupied areas, the red and green cards on the back of the door, all of that stuff. I mean, people have asked me, well, here it is. This is it right here. OSHA kits, first aid kits, right here. This is that corollary to the fire drill, that safety inspection. People never heard of it. Right here's the inventory that you're supposed to use to do that. It's right there on our page. It's under week 4. Okay. Could everybody see that? I don't know if folks can or not. It was Paul.
I see you.
You see me? All right. This assessment inventory.
There it goes.
There it is. My screen sharing keeps getting paused. But anyway, again, on week 4, assessment inventory, that's what you're supposed to use when you do the twice monthly safety inspection at your school. That goes along with the monthly fire drill. So if you got your monthly fire drill and you do your twice monthly safety inspection, or have your janitor do it, or usually the janitor does it, and this reports back to you. And it's just a checklist. It's very simple for them, to go through. You have your head custodian do that twice a month. You're golden. You're good to go. You follow that antecedent behaviors PowerPoint that I've got. You'll be able to cover your bases on cyberbullying, bullying, sexual harassment, offenses. You'll know your business on gangs. Look at your code of conduct, and then that state manual. All the discipline, violence, behavior, all that stuff. Those 4 documents will fix you up. They're what you use 99.9% of the time. When I trained principals and assistant principals, I said, look, if you got these 4 things, you're good. There's nothing that's going to fall. There's always an outlier, but there's nothing that's going to happen on a regular basis that's not covered in one of these. And they all and they're not they're not contradictory at all. They all fit together. They all fit together. All right. Tomorrow night, I'm gonna be on the air, and I'll put it in email. I'll be on the air tomorrow night at 8. If you got any questions, my hour is up for tonight. I appreciate everybody being involved. I'm going to end our meeting now. Again, tomorrow night, Thursday at 8 o'clock. I got a meeting from 7 to 8. So Erica said 8 was better for her. So I'll be back on the air at 8 tomorrow night if you have any questions. All right. Everybody have a good evening.